Nearly a decade ago, Rick and Morty was ruling the TV industry, winning Emmys, making millions off merchandise, and appearing absolutely everywhere. But only 10 years later, and it seems as if it has fallen off a cliff. Ratings dropped, fans left, and one of the most important people behind the show was fired. In the eyes of many fans, the show was completely dead. But just when the show seemed like it was finished, it came back to life. In the beginning, Rick and Morty was merely a solo project created by Justin Roiland. It was originally just a parody of Back to the Future, riddled with jokes you'd be more likely to see on South Park than you would come to expect from Rick and Morty. But this little short, written, animated, and voiced by Roiland, was not the Rick and Morty we all know and love. Instead, through the help of its other creator, Dan Harmon, it was used as the blueprint for the show. Before taking part in this project, Harmon had already built up a respectable reputation of his own. Roiland, however, was an unknown face in Hollywood, only ever having a few minor roles. They both had great ideas individually, but combined, those ideas had the potential to be an all-time duo. One day, the network Adult Swim approached Dan Harmon looking to see if he would create a show for them. Immediately, Harmon turned to team up with Roiland, saying he would only join the network if he had Roiland by his side, and Roiland was perfect for the Adult Swim brand. Together they managed to take the shorts previously made by Roiland and transform them into a full-length cartoon, with Roiland taking the main voice acting role, alongside bringing an energy that the show needed to succeed, and Harmon using his storytelling skills to bring these characters to life in a complicated and entertaining way. Adult Swim moved forward with the idea and picked up the pilot for the show. Immediately, the first season of Rick and Morty was a hit. It already developed its own cult-like fan base, and the show got constant praise for its creative, smart, or sometimes emotional use of sci-fi themes. The show filled a void that viewers didn't know they needed filled. Adult Swim saw all of the positivity and feedback and almost immediately greenlit a second season for the show. Even though season 1 thrived on chaotic humor, the writers, more specifically Dan Harmon, knew that this level of comedy was not sustainable, and so season 2 marked the beginning of the show's shifting focus on the dark backstory of Rick instead of just his day-to-day shenanigans. The writing of season 2 did this perfectly, and its newly devoted fan base loves season 2 just as, if not more than the first one. After only 2 seasons, Rick and Morty had already become one of Adult Swim's most popular and highest rated shows. Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland were really starting to build something great. Adult Swim quickly greenlit a 3rd season, and that was only the beginning of the show's peak. October 2017. Season 3 just finished airing, and now Rick and Morty is on top of the world. People loved how Rick and Morty was starting to evolve from this goofy show filled with one-off episodes to one they could both relate and laugh at. Season 3 had an unfathomable average US viewership of 2,560,000 per episode. To put that into perspective, for the entire series as a whole, outside of Season 3, not a single episode reached 2.4 million even. Season 3 had 6 and averaged an entire 160,000 more people per episode than the mark that was never even reached before. At this point, the show looked like it had limitless potential. Every season had been getting bigger and better than the last. Season 1 was amazing, Season 2 was better, and Season 3 was the statistical peak of the show. With Season 4 being announced not too long after Season 3's conclusion, the future seemed bright, until everything started to go wrong. Up to this point, every new season's existence depended on if the previous one was successful. Harmon and Roiland were tired of the stressful constraints of getting a season out in time with such short notice of its approval. For the sake of the show, they both agreed that it would be best for Adult Swim to order a long-term deal of 70 episodes. With that deal, the team would always be ahead of schedule and have more time to make bigger and better episodes. Contract disputes with the network raged on for months, and that delayed Season 4 and onward by a substantial amount. Eventually, over 2 years later, Season 4 was released to over 2 million live viewers, the most outside of Season 3 and the most ever for a season premiere. The anticipation has been there since the previous season's finale, and it was honestly met with severe disappointment. Despite Season 4 having some of the best writing of the whole series, including the infamous Emmy Award-winning episode Vat of Acid, fans didn't like the new season. Many people online said it felt completely different, or that it was their least favorite season yet. Season 4 had some major changes contributing to its differences due to its new order of episodes from Adult Swim. Since the show had to go on till at least season 10, Harmon and Roiland had to vastly expand the writing staff to meet a long-term demand that their small team couldn't provide. With more heads in the room, Roiland and Harmon's voices, who once overpowered the show's direction, became drowned out in the chaos. It was harder for Justin Roiland to keep up with the comedic twist he had put on the show since the beginning. Not only that, but viewership began to dip to the lowest the show had ever seen. And if you think about it, that should not be the case when you realize Season 4 released in the prime of the pandemic, a time when almost everyone was at home and had nothing better to do than watch TV. The show lost what it had before, and fans argued whether this was a good or a bad thing. Even though all of this was going on, Rick and Morty was definitely still a huge part of internet culture, and one bad season wasn't going to put an end to that. Hardcore fans still existed, but those fans were becoming divided, and Rick and Morty's reception took a huge hit. Of course, the show had to go on. They had an entire 60 episodes more to make from that point, and they fully intended to get those made and make them better. When Season 5 came out, the division of fans grew exponentially bigger, and Season 5 was considered the complete start of the end. Its episodes were a disaster and were poorly thrown together. They overcompensated for the complaints of Season 4, and that resulted in too much over-the-top wackiness that the fans could not handle. Not only that, but the emotionally driven story that they began to push started to become drowned out in the crossfire. Rick was becoming too soft, and instead of a unique character that fans loved, he was transitioning into more of a ploy for more cliche storylines. And of course, some of these episodes were so bad in some cases that it completely destroyed the reputation of the show in the eyes of its fans. But overall, the season was extremely inconsistent in quality, with some good episodes being outweighed by others. New episodes weren't at the same level of smart sci-fi concepts as before, and mainly relied on twist and shock factor. With Season 5 being the lowest rated season at the time, something had to be done, and it had to be done fast. At this point, Rick and Morty was no longer being seen as a cultural phenomenon, and all that attention they once had was now going to newer shows. The dominant reign of Rick and Morty was reaching a halt. Season 6 came out with mild expectations and completely blew everything out of the water. The show had once again hit the quality that we saw in previous seasons. They finally got back to creating episodes that actually fit the theme of the show. Solar Ricks and Night Family have two of the best concepts in the whole show, and they finally addressed issues that have been there since Season 2. The pure quality of episodes had never been higher, but that didn't mean they would be liked by everyone. Fans were still upset about the show shifting from its core, and a lot of viewers stopped watching the show altogether. Almost nobody was even talking about Rick and Morty now, and almost all internet relevancy had been lost. After 6 seasons, the show was just a long-running, stereotypical series instead of a new and exciting one where you could never expect what would happen next. The major decline can be seen not only from fans leaving, but also what had been going on behind the scenes with someone who has been there since the beginning. Justin Roiland was the sole creator of the original Rick and Morty, so his ideas were always at the top of the priority list. Except around Season 3, he slowly started stepping back from the production side of the show. By the midway point of Season 3's writing, Roiland had reportedly stopped contributing to the process completely. Once Season 3 had ended, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland had lost all communication with one another. With Roiland's absence in the writer's room, Harmon took a larger step in overseeing the show's production and pretty much became a solo creator. During Season 4, Roiland was barely even showing up to do recordings for his voice and recorded most of his lines from home. By Season 5, some of the show's own employees started saying that they haven't even met Roiland before, or that they haven't even seen him in years. For someone who once was the main face of the show, his downfall directly links to the show's own downfall. Almost all of this was unknown to the public for years until the infamous events that took place in 2023. In January 2023, a 2020 case became public, detailing an alleged domestic battery incident with Roiland and a woman he was dating at the time. The prosecutors of the case charged Roiland with 2 felonies to which he pleaded not guilty. The case quietly continued in the background until it was released. Immediately when the case became public, Roiland got fired from all of his projects including Rick and Morty, where it was announced that all of his characters were to be recast. This came at a horrible time because season 7 was already finishing production, and now the two main characters had to be recast completely. Only a couple of months after the case made national news, the charges were fully dropped. But at this point, it had been too late. Other people had been saying similar things about Roiland, and the damage had already been done. With Roiland gone, the show had to continue, but things did not look good. Rick and Morty was finally back in the news, but in the worst way imaginable. For years, the show has received the same criticism, but now it was doubled. Everyone had been thinking it was impossible for the show to function without Roiland. Half the cast was gone, half the creator duo was gone, and in the eyes of many, the show was as good as dead. Despite the huge loss on paper, the show was basically as fine-tuned as it gets under the control of Dan Harmon. At this point, the writer's room was already established and they knew exactly how to make good episodes of Rick and Morty. Eventually, just 9 months after all of the Justin Roiland scandals and the two main characters were recast, Season 7 premiered in October of 2023. With the future of the show seeming bleak, Season 7 was the make or break factor. And to the surprise of many, Season 7, the first without the show's creator, was one of the best in years. The seasons prior had Rick doing everything but coming to terms with his past, but Season 7 is where that all changed. Out of nowhere, Episode 5 gave fans not only one of the best episodes the show has ever seen, but it finally gave the fans what they wanted to see: Rick confronting his past and a return to the show's roots. It brought back fan-favorite characters and gave context to previous plots that made the whole show make more sense. Rick completes so much, and the season is already so good by the halfway mark that it didn't possibly seem like it could be better. The final half of episodes were still great with some very cool themes, but the season's finale is what really stands out. Episode 10, Fear No More, the one I got my name from, if you couldn't tell, is arguably the best season finale in the show's existence. With the season that so far was dominated by Rick's battle with Rick Prime and enduring his own mental torture, Fear No More perfectly hit on Morty's own emotions. We'd only seen a fraction of the amount of Morty's feelings as we've seen Rick's, so something like this had to come at some point. Like Rick, Morty finally comes to terms with his own hidden problems. In Season 7, both Rick and Morty grew in a way that made the series better and more viable for the future. Not even a year later, Rick and Morty had already escaped from the shadows of the controversies, and a new light has been shed upon them. Season 8 had another solid run, and like the ones before it, it finished with an amazing finale. And with the show finally reaching a stable point after once being in complete freefall, Rick and Morty proved all of its doubters wrong and showed that they could survive without Justin Roiland, who many people thought of as the brains behind the whole show prior to everything that happened. Unlike almost every other show to suffer this same type of incident, Rick and Morty grew beyond its creators and became its own self-sufficient production, reaching a god-tier rank among shows. Even though the show will never have the media support or the cultural impact that it once had, the show has reached a point where, as a viewer and a creator, you can only be glad that the rough times are behind and the show is entering a new era of immortality. Rick and Morty didn't just survive the biggest controversy in Adult Swim history, it completely revived itself. Thank you guys so much for sticking to the end. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more Rick and Morty videos.